education, correctional programs, and in the Hillsborough County Jail. He is currently serving as a reading language instructor at Gary High School in Tampa. He offers you still offering courses in Miracle?
No more.
No more courses in Miracle, okay. But he knows a lot about it, he can talk to you about it. He also does intuitive and inner guidance counseling on an individual basis to help those that are willing, and to see all the problems that are the same problems that can be solved by changing your thinking or belief system. And he enjoys more than anything else sharing unlimited truth, strength, and love of who we are as a spirit within, if we're open to receive. Please help me warmly welcome Gonzalo to the platform.
Thank you. So even though I'm no longer given the Course in Miracles groups, I used to have 4 groups. And it got a bit much and it got a bit routine and I was tired, but I'm still very actively practicing the Course in Miracles. That's what matters. I think me and a lot of people get comfortable in a structured setting, and we need the structure for a while because we're very undisciplined. Back to the topic for tonight. And we do need a lot of structure spiritually, but there comes a point where the structure can only take you so far, and it's just you, the Holy Spirit, the Christ, and the path. And that's where the structure eventually just wants to get deeper and deeper into the practice. So still very much living what Jesus in the Course in Miracles teaches, just not in a formal group setting. So the title for tonight is Straight Ahead, not left or right, just straight ahead. And I always get something on the way to church here that fits with the theme. And again, on the way here, down 38th Avenue, there was a guy wanting to pass me from behind, and he was coming up from behind. I drive slow, so that happens a lot. But he turned to pass me around me, and he didn't look far enough ahead to see that the car that he turned behind was going slower than I was. So he ended up backing up further, having to get behind me again, and then moving on from there. The point being, this happens so much, and it's just a symbol here in the world that how our egoic mind, which is so consumed with being busy and fast and hasty and doing, incessant doing, the egoic mind can't see past this. This is pretty much the frame of reference of the egoic mind. It's right in front of us. It's reactivity, it's hastiness, it's anxiousness, it's busyness. This is what the ego mind that we've come to believe is normal for us makes us prisoner to. So that was just another common symbol that reminded me of how vigilant we need to be against that. So speaking of which, I recently, in my day job as a school teacher, we recently went on a field trip where we took teenage boys to a kind of a motivational function. And I sat back, I was one of the chaperones, and I sat back and saw we had a big turnout in the room, but I was most noticing the adults in the room, mostly men, because it was kind of a male to young male mentoring type of deal. And I noticed most of the men in the room, while we were sitting in the room, were on their phones. And I thought to myself, we're supposed to be trying to teach these young men how to be disciplined, and we can't sit for a few seconds and be disciplined enough just to sit and be present without checking our phones. I imagine not everything that they were looking at their phones was urgent business. And it just dawned on me again how just consuming the ego mind is in us staying distracted away from our God-given purpose, our God-given presence. If you think about it, all the busyness that the ego has gotten us used to, all of the hastiness, the anxiousness, and I've got to do, I can't sit still. This has become normal in the world, and it is symbolic of how little we feel about ourselves to where we can't just be still, and our presence, the Spirit, the presence of God be good enough for us to just rest with. We're saying when we can't sit still, we're saying really deeply within is that I'm not good enough to just be with the presence of God. So therefore I have to stay busy to keep my mind away from the presence of God, which is always perfect enough. That's what underneath all of the busyness is the message that I feel the Holy Spirit and Jesus is trying to get to us, that all the incessant busyness and doing is really keeping us running away from our God-given self within, that if we're going to truly know that self, we have to be disciplined and trained to just be still throughout the day. And however we work into our meditative practice, morning, evening, very helpful to train our minds down. And also, more importantly, how we walk through the day with constant invitations to be busy and to be hooked and to be anxious and to start running lists in our head and start running hypotheticals and what is constant invitations to be on edge and to be fearful and to be paranoid and to look at these temptations and emotions and constant invitations into trapped thinking, look at them and not deny our human experience, but simply use them for purposes of turning them over to the light of God over and over and over. And here in our world, we will be busy, we will be active people. Again, it's not about denying our God-given humanity. No, quite the opposite. It's about using it for higher purpose. It's about using the temptations to get caught up in all of the world's doing and all of the world's fears, planning and incessant trying to control things and control other people and control outcomes, which we have no real control. And all the while, when we're caught up there, we don't have the expressive faith of just resting in the presence of God and allowing that space of resting for the knowing to come to us, for all the plans to come to us, for all the what to do's to come to us, for all the what to say's to come to us, for all the what next to come to us in that quiet space within that a trained, disciplined mind can access. We don't know that space, so we stay on the ego's race of keeping our minds full and busy, which is the mission of the ego, which has firmly been accomplished in our world. That's why most people don't know how faithless we're living here on earth, because we identify with all of the doing and the desperation that comes with doing, as opposed to identifying with the stability, the rock solid stability, which is the only place we can get stability, which is in the presence of God, in the presence of the light, in the presence of the Christ, in the presence of the Spirit. That's it. There is no stability in this world. Stop trying to get stability and stop trying to control things in the world which we have no control over. This is the trap here. And even though I've been teaching public school for a long time, I see it as the public school system, just like all the other systems in our world, be it religious, social, cultural, family, relationship systems. All of these systems serve in the worldly sense to keep us trapped, to keep us prisoner. Strong language to keep us slave to all of the expectations of doing in the world without listening to what the Holy Spirit and the presence of God is guiding us to do, to be in the best interest of everyone. And again, we won't know that true guidance and that true light of where to go, what to say, what to do. We won't know it. It'll be covered up by all the worldly doing. Why? Because you should. Because you should, Gonzalo. That's what you should do, according to the world's gospel of do and don't ask any questions. So again, we don't deny our humanity. It's not about pretending or faking that we have problems and worries in the world. That wouldn't be helpful. I've been there, just trying to flippantly dismiss our worldly troubles and burdens. That's not helpful at all. That's actually rather harmful. That pushes us back further. But what we use it, and we constantly offer up those worries and anxieties, the depression, the fears, the guilt, the shame, the unworthiness, all of that stuff that's buried under that layer of doing and busyness that we don't realize how much has enslaved us into that deeper layer of darkness that's covered over our God-given perfection. That's the treasure, that's the heaven that awaits us within. It's our work to use our very powerful free will to ask for the voice, the presence that's always available to us. The light of God that's always available to us, but we have to use our powerful free will to ask to be guided within. And while the world is looking like straight hell, which it is and has for a long time, if we allow it to, Holy Spirit and Jesus is asking us to ask him for guidance to see the world with a different set of eyes, to see the world and see each other with a different set of eyes that is not of this world, with his eyes, which allows us to see past our separate interests and our separate identities and our separate categories that has us feeling so paranoid and fearful and suspicious of each other. He's asking us constantly to ask him to guide us through with true seeing and true hearing and true listening, to be able to guide us through a very fearful, turbulent world, and use this turbulence and disturbance for a purpose of healing and release and return back to that God-given perfection within, which is waiting for us as long as we really, really desire to get past what the world taught us we should be and should live like. And again, we've got eons of evidence to look at the way the world's teachings have taught us how we should live, to evidence that that thinking and those belief systems of the world have been massive failures. I always say we can repeat the things that we've always done, the belief systems that we've always done, the cultural and the social and the educational training that we've always repeated and relived over and over and generation after generation. And I'm looking at the evidence of the world, and I don't see a lot of people with big smiles on their faces to evidence to me that it's actually working. So if we're tuned in and we're listening, we can step back and be called to hear the constant presence there that is letting us know that there's a much deeper, richer, elevated truth for us to get to know about ourselves if we train our minds and our hearts to learn to listen more carefully, to learn to slow down and not be so reactive, and just take with us during the day a constant place of a prayerful center of asking to be shown, just asking to be shown the way. Simple. The world and the ego is addicted to complication. We want simple. One of the things that have become clearer and clearer the deeper I go on this journey is that the Holy Spirit and Jesus' guidance is always so simple. While we try to theorize and conceptualize what to do spiritually, he's telling us very simply to just ask, and keep asking for guidance as we walk through the day. Before we attach judgment and condemnation to ourselves and others, to keep asking while this movie runs in our mind for guidance with how to deal with all the thoughts, the judgments, the condemnation, the guilt, the hatred that comes up buried within at the bottom of our own self-hatred, of our own extreme self-hatred, which we've learned to project out in the world at others and separate ourselves and keep ourselves away from that God-given truth within by really taking responsibility of the journey of uncovering all of those hatreds and all of those judgments. Really simple, but again, we have to practice that simplicity. We have to really discipline ourselves for that simplicity to be shown in our minds and our hearts. And if we do, we'll be led to a presence, a feeling, a space in our minds and our hearts that is indescribable. We can use words because we communicate with words, but really the place where the Holy Spirit and Jesus is leading us, the place of our highest, truest identity is so indescribably joyful and free and clear. These words pale at trying to approach the immensity of that experience. We use words, we use lessons and books, we need them because again, we're very undisciplined, but ultimately the Holy Spirit and Jesus is leading us to have the experience. The deeper experience is what we want. That's why I said group and structure and structured study, that's there for a purpose for us to discipline ourselves. Then at some point, we've got to kind of take it from there. We've got to take it deeper from there. And the experience is what we want of what the Christ presence within is leading us to. That is absolutely indescribable. But I can tell you with full certainty that is the most worthwhile purpose that you will ever have. We're in this world experience, we're human beings, and we do not deny anything that we experience as a human. All of our sorrow, all of our darkness and depression and addiction and bad habits that we have to walk through, we don't deny any of it. Quite the opposite. We use it all to turn it over to our perfect God-given light, which is always available and always unrelentingly forgiving and washing us clean of any judgment and condemnation that we could put on ourselves and turn over and attach to anyone else for whatever reason that we may have learned to separate ourselves from others. So this is the call that is always there for us. We're gonna, again, walk through a human experience, and we never deny it or pretend it or fake it. That's not what we're here for. But we are here to use it for a different purpose. And again, as a teacher for a long time now, I have the worldly role of teacher, but really underneath it all, I let those students know in full intensity every day that their value does not come from the results of what they do in this world. If they don't hear it anywhere else, they're going to hear it from me, that their value as a being, as an identity, does not and will never come from the results of what they do as a student, as a person, as a citizen, as any worldly label you can give it. Their value does not come from accomplishment or approval seeking or validation seeking or titles or accumulation of things. Absolutely not. Their value, our value, only comes from our God-given perfection, freely given. It's up to us to learn to accept it and to practice it. Key word, to practice it, to invite it in, to discipline our minds and our hearts, to learn to see past all the garbage that taught us that we are not good enough and not worthy enough, and not valuable enough. So therefore we have to go out in the world and seek some type of value and identity in the world because we don't feel good enough as a being. That call to truly know our God-given perfection, that is the most worthwhile purpose and really the only purpose that we have. But while we're here as humans, we can use our human experience and all the distraction, we can use that to train ourselves back to our God-given natural state. And the deeper you go, you'll start to see that a quiet, trained mind, a spacious spirit mind, feels like the most natural place you could ever be. Once you go deeper into your God-given truth, you'll start to get the fact that your spiritual sense of self is a place you should have been the whole time anyway, because it kind of feels like we've been wasting our time the deeper you go back to your highest, truest self that God created. It feels so natural, like a return home. And that's the perfection that we want to keep going deeper and deeper and more eternally soaking ourselves in. And that requires a whole lot of work, a whole lot of discipline, a whole lot of commitment. But again, the deeper you practice and become unconditional in our purpose toward how we see each other and how we look at ourselves as the same identity, not these separate identities, the deeper we go in that practice and experience, then the more convinced we are that we've only got one purpose here. There are no other purposes, no matter how important the world screams that all of these purposes and worldly goals and worldly ambitions are, that we've only got one true purpose for being. That's just to know ourselves as God created us. Simply that, know ourselves as God created us and use our worldly experience to help walk us toward that God-given, light-filled goal. That's why we're here. So I offer to you to ponder committing and disciplining yourselves, making it an absolute priority in your day, because we make time for other stuff that we find so important. We make time for it. So I just offer for you to make time during the day to make as a priority quiet time with the Spirit. That's one of the things I really emphasize with young people. While the world is telling us to stay busy, absolutely make it a priority to take as much quiet time as you can. If all you have is just a minute here and there in some quiet space, to just go within and just commune with the Spirit. Nothing fancy, no fancy routines or prayer, just quiet space to commune with the Spirit, however you do that. The more disciplined we do that, you'll be amazed at how much shedding occurs just by using quiet space that the Holy Spirit and the Christ dwell within for us to communicate to. You'll be amazed at how much intense shedding is offered to us in that quiet space, which many of us have accelerated that since the last several years. And So I appreciate you taking this time to listen to this and acknowledge yourself for coming out and hearing this.